as most of you know, I'm Maria Gillen. I'm pleased to welcome you here to the Distinguished Poet Series at Passaic County Community College. We're extremely grateful to the New Jersey State Council on the Arts, Department of State, for its support of the Distinguished Poet Series that has enabled us to bring poets like Galway Cannell, Carolyn Kaiser, Hayden Carruth, Bruce Stone, Denise Leverdoff, Sharon Olds. Yes, I must get in a lot of the women here.
Right.
And poets like our poets today, and to give people a chance to hear their work and respond to their work. I'm very pleased to introduce our first reader today, who is Roland Flint, and there's a sheet outside with a lot of specific information about Roland's background. I'll say just very quickly that he teaches at Georgetown University. Is what I've heard from every single person that I've met him is that not only is he a wonderful poet, but he's also a superb teacher. And every time I mentioned his name, people said, "Oh, he is so fantastic." So we're going to be expecting a lot from Roland Flint after that. He has published a number of books, including Running Green, which are his selected poems, and his most recent book is called Sicily, and it's a chapbook from North Carolina Wesleyan Press. He's received a number of grants from the National Endowment for the Arts and has served on NEA panels. There are a lot of other facts that I could read to you about Roland Flynn, but I think it's enough to say that in his poetry I find a compassion and a concern for human beings and a kind of love for human beings that seems to me to be essential for great literature. And I was so impressed in reading his chapbook, Sicily, to find that no matter how many times I went back to read it, it always had the effect of moving me to tears. Roland Flynn.
Here's a little poem called Earthworm. I think of a girl who hated to walk in the rain, loathing to step on them. I hope she got over that. We like to keep one on the sidewalk and line it up with another for an excruciating race, or to put it back in the grass and watch its progress burrow. We said when he's underground and worming, the earth goes right through him. I still think of him that way, lank, blind, both ends open, refining whatever comes, dirt among rose roots, yeasty bodies. He doesn't look for trouble, he just follows warmth at the earth's curve, coming up only for rain and the feet of girls. Could you hear me in the back? Yes. That's from a book that was published in 1983, and I want to read one other poem from it called Follow. Are we all right now on sound and light? Pardon me?
Was the book called Follow or the poem was called Follow?
The poem is called Follow. I was at lunch one day with friends and they were talking about moments in history excuse me, they would like to have been present. One of them wished he'd been around for the flowering of Byzantine culture. Another for that cultural event in Mexican history, Quetzalcoatl, which I mispronounced. And I had this idea that I would like to have been present when Jesus called the fishermen. Not because I'm a conventional Christian, because I'm not. Not because I'm conventionally religious, because I'm not. But I'm fascinated with the audacity of the storyteller who asks us to believe that Jesus just called these guys and they went with him. And it fascinates me because they were laborers, and that's different from calling other kinds of people. I thought of how hard it would be to call my dad from a job, who worked at all of his jobs as if he were the owner, you know, that kind. So that's what, I didn't bring this up, I thought it too modest a wish compared to their much more culturally interesting ones. But the poem came from that. It's called Follow. Now here is this man mending his nets after a long day, his fingers nicked here and there by ropes and hooks, pain like tomorrow in the small of his back, his feet blue with his name, stinking of baits, his mind on a beer and dinner, nothing else. A man who describes the settled shape of his life every time his hands make and snug a perfect knot. I want to understand, if only for the story, how a man like this, a man like my father in Harvest, like Bunk McVeigh in The Stench of Lobstering, or a teamster, a steel worker, how an ordinary working stick could just be called away. It's only in one account he first brings in a netful. In all the others, he just calls, they return the look or stare, and then they straightaway leave their nets to follow. That's all there is. You have to figure what was in that call, that look. And I wouldn't try it on a tired working man, unless I was God's son. He'd kick your ass right off the pier. If they had been vagrants, poets or minstrels, I'd understand that, men who would follow a different dog. But how does a man whose movement, day after day after day, absolutely trusts the shape it fills, put everything down, and walk away? I'd pass up all the fancy stunting with Lazarus and the lepers to see that one. Well, I wanted to read just a couple from that book. And now what I'm going to read is a mix of new and newer poems. Some from that chapbook that Maria mentioned is out here. This is called Juggle, and it's about adultery. And it quotes, without naming him, John Cheever, who referred to the delicious skullduggery of the illicit. The poem doesn't quite take that view, but it's called Juggle. This delicious skullduggery, as one master calls it, requires that you be perfectly normal with the missus, but not too normal, chatting of this or that. To be solicitous, but no more than usual, flattering only if it comes easily. To be a successful philanderer first, by being a perfect husband, that kind. To telephone regularly, daily, so you may triangulate to know exactly where she is or will be when you are covered or sunk. To be amorous, especially before and after, but again, within bounds. To be ordinarily busy about the house, or yard, or career, or exercise, and errands, yes, many, as always. To whistle innocence tunelessly, or to be irritable suddenly over little, if these are your faithful foils. In short, to keep the quotidian squashy, but honor the crucial routines. Don't be surprised how long you can keep them up. Soon yourself a maestro of skulls and dugs, of juggling and jugs. I'll only ask this one last time. Could you hear all of that? Okay.
It would be a help, I think, to close that window.
Yeah, that's what
There's a lot of traffic noise coming in. Out there.
At least it will improve the recording if it's being recorded, huh? Here's a little poem called Park River, North Dakota, 1939. That was my hometown. And it begins with a quotation. And it's a little about one kind of small town prejudice in the Midwest. And about, you'll see the mother who tries to counter it, even if she does it with a cliche, and the way that it stays with one. So the first line is this quotation: pitch black and blood all over the alley. is how it reached you, 5 years old, when the Mexicans killed each other that Saturday night in Park River. They used knives, being Mexican, long ones, razor sharp, and were drunk also, and for the same reason, having followed the harvest north. You were afraid of anything Mexican for a long time, afraid for your father, who left on Saturday nights without mother, who said, "We love Mexicans too." And what was it later in the Marines, pulling weekends to Tijuana? Only whores and beer? Or the smell of blood, the lure of alleys, and star holes stuck in the body's night? Well, I wasn't going to read this, but I'm going to. It's called Homage, and it's a kind of prose poem that almost ends in a limerick. I mean, it has a limerick in it, but it doesn't quite end there. And I understand that I haven't quite got the historical facts right, but this is the way I heard or remember the limerick. It's called Homage. I gave a reading in North Carolina, and someone sent me a postcard afterward, and it had on it this postcard photograph, a beautiful one of Edna St. Vincent Millay, and that's what it comes from. On my desk is a postcard photograph of Edna St. Vincent Millay, at about 30 years of age, perhaps in the 1920s, her fourth book biding its time. Delicately, absently, she is holding the branch ends of a tulip tree, 20 or so open blossoms making a frame around her, her expressive writer's hands and fingers half open to us, her body forward to the camera, her exquisite face averted as if deeply in thought, as if dreaming. It is also as if she has just come here where the finely tracing branches are bending, some almost to the grass, around the opening she fits in, as if she has stepped into it, grasped lightly the opposed branches, one in either hand, each near a blossom, candle white, and now something, a phrase, an idea, a word, has called her deeply away. Her dress appears to be plain cotton and is badly wrinkled, yet her body, its form as she dreams, is so sensual, and oddly, as if a deer or iris had for a moment found its human shape, so calmly that her dress, despite disorder, is a foil's perfection of the figure. Her neck is graceful and long with her head turned so, her face and profile very beautifully absorbed by what we cannot see. So removing is her meditative cast that were she not also warm with human presence, I could imagine she might ascend if she let go of the branches, something broken from the tree itself. All this should bring back only delicacy from her poems, but she has made me remember a limerick in her honor Alan Tate offered at a party 30 years ago. Prayed beautiful Edna Millay as she paused in her garden one day, "Send me sweet Percy Shelley to lie on my belly, and not Stephen Vincent Benet."
Poor Roland Flint. I hope that everyone in the world does not decide to walk in and out while you are reading. All right, I give you permission to hurl something at them. I will even provide you with something. Despite it all, Roland, what I said about him certainly was proven true in this reading, I think, and he certainly reduced me to tears. What little makeup I had remembered to put on was washed right off.
Or to just start over again.
Right,
Right,
yeah.
I mean,
Anyway, while Robert Mezey, am I saying it correctly, Mezey, is getting some coffee for himself in order to fortify himself for what has turned out to be a very difficult reading. I'll just say that Robert Mezey, of course, has a lot of very specific information on this pink sheet, which is outside, but in addition to the fact that he has a number of books, that his latest book, Evening Wind, is outside on the table and is available for sale, as is Roland Flint's book, Sicily. And in addition to the fact that that's a new book that's out and that He's the co-editor of Naked Poetry. I'll say that I first ran across his work when I used Naked Poetry I started using Naked Poetry with some of my classes. His biggest compliment, I think, is that one of my students stole Naked Poetry about a year ago, and I've been using it for I don't know when it came out, but I've been using it for a long time with my classes, and I do think it's one of the finest collections of poetry that I've run across, at least certainly for male poets anyway. Well, I have to put that little reminder in, but it is a wonderful book to use with classes, and I also was aware that at the end of the collection there are some poems by Robert as well as some poems by Stephen Berg, and I remember reading those poems perhaps 15 years ago and thinking how alive they were, how vital, how energetic, and how much a part of a kind of American idiom they are. And I think that was the reason why I invited Robert Mezey here today to read, and I hope that you will also find his poetry as energetic and alive as I do.
I've been working the last few months on the collected poems of Henry Coulette, an old close friend of mine who died about a year ago, last year. And I thought I might begin with a couple of short things by him. You may not know his name. He was really out of it, and many people have never heard of him, but he was, I think, one of the finest poets in America, and maybe the best epigrammatist. We don't have too many of those. Let me say a couple of his two-liners. One goes, "He has as many wives as there are fates. They are to him as parsley is to plates." And then there's one that goes, "I understand your tongue. I get the message. You are a good book, open to the best passage." And I'm skipping some of the funny ones to work my way up to this, which is not so funny at all. It's a tragic epigram. It refers to the myth of Eurydice, Orpheus going down to hell to get Eurydice out. "Eurydice's gone. The loneliness is grand. But were she to come back, dish rag in hand..." And finally, this tiny elegy for a cat. This is 8 lines of 5 syllables each, called Petition. "Lord of the 10th life, welcome my Jerome, a fierce gold tabby, make him feel at home. He loves bird and mouse, he loves a man's lap, and in winter light, paws tucked in, a nap." I've been spending a lot of time the last few months also translating the poems of Borges, a poet I've really fallen in love with, and I'm working at, I do all the poems I think, or at least a large selected poems. Let me read just a couple of them. As it happens, I'm going to be reading a number of sonnets today. And I was remembering that a good many years back, Jim Wright wrote a letter to me saying, "I've just committed 2 sonnets shortly to appear in the Hudson Review. I feel I am exposing myself before the General Assembly of the UN." But he wrote, he didn't have a great knack for sonnets, I think, but he wrote sonnets all his life and loved the form. And I thought, well, it'd be fun to read sonnets here in Paterson, nearby where Dr. Williams inveighed for 60 years against the form. But the sonnet is too strong a form to, it survives all those silly prejudices, as well as our poor attempts to write it. These are a couple of sonnets, one poem, but in 2 parts, a couple of sonnets by Borges called Chess. Since they're Spanish sonnets, I decided I would make them English sonnets. he refers to Omar Khayyam in the poem. You may remember in the Rubaiyat there's a quatrain about the old idea of comparing life to a chess game, and he does it with great elaborates on that with great vigor. Chess. Abstracted in their nooks, the players lash their lagging pieces into line. The board detains them till all hours with the scored perimeters wherein two colors clash, wherein formations throb and radiate magical lines of force, Homeric tower, light cavalry, armored queen, king without power, deceitful priests, foot soldiers choked with hate. And when the players one by one are gone, when time has taken them as they took a pawn, by no means will the ritual have ceased. This war was kindled in the glowing east. Its theater now is everywhere, wherever the game is played. The game goes on forever. Faint king, slant bishop, queen of bloody arts, straight charging rooks and pawns with heavy loads, over the light and shadow of the roads, seek out and strike their bristling counterparts. None of them know that the much-noted hand above them governs their foreshadowed fates, nor that their little tours and desperate straits are subject to implacable command. In the same way, the player is the ward, the sentence is Omar's, of the other board, our daily board of black nights and white days. God moves the player as the player the piece. What God behind God opens this caprice of dust and dreams and time and agonies? And this next one is a ballad. It's called Malanga. It's kind of something like a tango. It's popular folk dance of the Argentine. And Borges, like many sedentary men, intellectuals and artists, great attraction to and admiration of men of action, especially inarticulate men, warriors with codes. And he wrote quite a number of both stories and poems about the low life of Buenos Aires, knife fighters and such. And this is called The Ballad of the Stranger, or Malanga of the Stranger. The story is always the same story, with every step retraced. They tell the story in Buenos Aires, in the countryside to the east. There are always two that they talk of, a stranger and a local guy. It is always evening. The evening star shines in the evening sky. They have never seen each other's faces, nor will they ever again. The quarrel has nothing to do with money or the favors of a woman. The stranger has heard tell of a man whose courage has won renown. Now he has come to see for himself and searches all over town. He asks him nicely to step outside in a quiet, unthreatening voice. They both know, and neither would wish to bring shame on the house. Now did the knives flash in the air. Now was the battle joined. Now a man lay still in the street without having made a sound. They never met before that evening. They will not meet again. It was not greed that started it, and not the love of a woman. No use in being more skillful, no use in being more fit. Always the one who dies is the one who went out looking for it. All their lives, the two men were living for that test. Time has already erased their faces, soon their names erased.